Want to learn how to manage your village as easily and efficiently as possible? Then listen up. Managing your village is one of the hardest things to get down in Medieval Dynasty, but I'm here to show you how to make your villagers, workplaces, and fields work hand in hand to be as hands-free as possible, as well as show you some overlooked management tools you will need to master village management and automation. Alright, let's break it down. In the early game of Medieval Dynasty, it's not too hard to run around and gather what you need, but once you invite 1, 10, or even 50 plus villagers, you might find yourself overwhelmed. Just for a quick little rundown, to invite a villager to your village, find a campfire in towns on the valley map or campfires on the outskirts of town in the oxbow, decide the villager you want by using inspect mode to see which skills they have, then talk to them and invite them to your settlement. For any village to work efficiently, you're going to need at least 1 resource storage and 1 food storage. Storage buildings act as a little portal to all of your goods, allowing you or your villagers to access your resources whenever needed. One of the cool things about storage buildings is that if you build multiple storage buildings of the same type on different parts of the map, not only will increase the total carry capacity, but their inventories will also be connected to each other. These rules apply to both food and resource storage buildings. Just remember they must be of the same type. If you don't know whether an item should be placed in the resource or the food storage, check down here in your inventory and see whether it says food or resource storage. Now let's get on to villagers. Villagers are going to be the ones generating resources for you, providing they have all of the resources they need, with the first ones being their most basic needs: a house, food, water, and firewood. A house is relatively easy and doesn't require much automation. Just build the house, stick a person inside through the management tab, and you're done. Houses will degrade over time though, so be sure to pull out your building hammer and repair the place once it breaks down. If you have a building hut, you can have a worker do this for you in the management tab, but this is a late game building, so this is something you won't be able to automate right off the bat. Food is relatively easy to take care of for villagers. While you could go manually hunt and cook some meat for your villagers when your town is small, this may not be very efficient in the long run. The best ways I would recommend generating food will be getting your farm sheds online and planting cabbages and grains, having hunters hunt for you, providing you place knives in the resource storage chest for them to use, and a kitchen where you have a production skill villager cooking meals for you. My favorite foods to automate at this current time are flatbread, pottage, scrambled eggs, and cheese, because a lot of these foods have big hunger values and easy resource gain. Water is also relatively easy to gain, so long as you have a villager filling buckets in the well and a villager in the workshop making buckets for you. Place water buckets in the food storage if you want to manually fill your villagers' water meters, but if you place buckets in a resource storage and have a villager working at the well, they will automatically fill and refill any of those buckets. Firewood will be one of the harder resources to automate for your villagers because the amount of firewood villagers need is dependent on the season, their house, and what insulation they have. The higher quality the house, the less firewood needed. Now technically any wood can be used as firewood, but villagers will take firewood before all others, and I generally recommend to only burn firewood if possible. You can turn off the option for villagers to even use certain types of resources and consumables in the People's Demand Control menu in the Management tab. You can also offset a bit of the villagers' needs if you take the Castellan skill and the Diplomacy skill tree, reducing villagers' needs by up to 30% and making it a lot easier to keep up with population growth. Alright, you got your villager in a house and all their basic needs met, so let's put them to work. Choose a workplace, select an empty slot, and choose a villager that best fits that skill for the job. I'm going to use the woodshed as the first example because this should be the first workplace you build, so let's focus on automating that. If you pull up the goods production tab under any workplace, you can see what tools are needed here for this job to work, as well as what is required to produce a certain object. A woodshed only needs axes to work, so it's a relatively easy workplace to automate. Once you have placed the required tools in the resource storage or the workplace chest, you can change the work intensity on the workplace, and you'll see how much of each resource will be generated each day here. Villagers will then place any of the generated resources in the appropriate storage building. Some items, like firewood for example, will require you to have items instead of tools in your resource storage before producing. The tab next to this one is the Local Production tab, which in my opinion is one of the most useful tools in the game. This tab can be viewed in any workplace and it will show how many goods are being produced versus how many goods are being consumed. Be sure to check on this tab every once in a while if you are overproducing or underproducing certain goods. When it comes to tools, tools are often one of the things I wait to automate until the late game, because a low-level villager in the smith isn't going to generate you nearly enough tools from the get-go. You're gonna have to mine most of your metals manually until you unlock a mine anyway, so I recommend making the tools yourself. Once you have a higher level villager in the smithy, generating tools for your villagers shouldn't be much of a problem at all. Now farms take a lot of attention because it's the only job where the villagers have to manually work to get the job done. You will see them fertilize, plow, sow, and harvest your fields, whereas other jobs, villagers will stand around or even do nothing, and the work still gets done. If you're not sure how big your field should be, I recommend having about 100 plots per field worker. You could probably push that number closer to 110 or maybe even 120, but that's only if you've optimized your field workers to the max, having them live near the farm shed and having your farm shed near the field, leaving little time to travel in between. Another reason why farms take a lot of attention is because they have to be manually set each season, which unfortunately can't be automated. You can get around this though by creating smaller separate fields, where each one is designed to be used depending on which season it is, but a lot of field space will go underutilized in this scenario. If you can't afford the space though and you don't want to touch your fields, try doing smaller specific fields. Animal automation is also really easy. You will just need animals housed in their respective buildings, animal feed for the animals, and an animal breeder stationed there to gather the resources for you. Generating animal feed will probably be your biggest struggle because the more animals you have, the more animal feed stacks up. Your animals won't die if they run out of food, but they will stop generating resources and mating, so I try not to leave them hanging too long. The best way to generate animal feed is in tandem with farming. I recommend making a specific field for rye and oats. Rye and oats are planted in different seasons so they cycle perfectly together on the same field. Once your farm shed workers harvest the oats and rye, have a barn worker thresh the oats and rye into grain, as well as having them make animal feed. Straw is a byproduct of threshing oats and rye, so you shouldn't have to worry too much about gathering straw. But if you really need extra straw, you can gather extra straw if you have a villager working in the extraction shed. Now, if you're having trouble keeping up with managing resources at this point, I would be careful with market stalls because you're gonna have to not only focus on generating goods, but now selling them. Your market stall workers should level relatively fast, so you really need to be careful to balance how much you're selling with how much you're making. Once your stall worker reaches 10 in their skill, it should be a lot easier to manage. Lastly, let's talk about a few challenges you may run into while getting your village up and running. But first, the king wants me to thank you all for helping us reach the milestone of 4,000 subscribers. But that doesn't mean you can just get away with not contributing to the king's tax of 1 like or 1 sub. I hear hitting the bell gives you a pretty good tax break too. Anyways, challenges. The first challenge you may run into is overabundance. If you don't keep your resources in check, you're gonna run out of space really quickly. You can make extra resource storage buildings if you need them, but that doesn't necessarily solve the root of the cause. One thing I like to do is place large stacks of excess resources in a large wicker basket next to the chest, and I also like to place some logs in this little corner over here. Now, baby booms are the bane of a perfectly automated village. Once you pair 2 villagers with each other, it's only a matter of time before they get married and start having children. Children come with heightened stats, so it's not a bad thing to pair up villagers. However, once the villagers become mothers, they will not work for a whole 2 years. To prevent a major loss of resources during this time, I recommend most of your extractor and gatherer villagers be male villagers, while you can have your female villagers working most of the production and farming jobs. Having villagers that are good in multiple skills can also help offset your temporary worker loss, so consider finding some villagers with 3s and multiple skills. And lastly, sometimes you may notice an icon pop up on your screen and you can't figure out what or why there's a problem. If the workplace doesn't show the tool or resource you are missing, click on the villager with the missing resource and it should tell you exactly what you're missing. If it says you're missing the resource and you have it, it probably just needs a bit of time to update, so just leave it as it is. Now, this was a lot of information and it really only scratches the surface to managing your village. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to leave a comment. And if you're interested in more medieval content, be sure to check out the video on the screen right here. But that's all I have for today, guys. So until next time, thanks for watching and take care.